As I zipped up my duffel bag, the reality of my impending deployment to Iraq sank in like a lead weight in my gut. It was my first time being deployed, and the mix of nerves and excitement was palpable. But what really gnawed at me was the thought of leaving Sarah behind. Sarah and I had been through it all together. High school sweethearts, we'd stuck by each other's side through thick and thin. We'd always dreamed of starting a family, but now, with my deployment on the horizon, those dreams felt like distant mirages shimmering in the desert heat. Standing in our small apartment, surrounded by the remnants of our life together, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt for leaving Sarah behind. She tried to hide it, but I could see the worry etched in the lines of her face as she helped me pack. As we hugged goodbye, I could feel her trembling against me, her tears soaking into my uniform. "Just promise me you'll come back to me, James," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I held her close, trying to convey all the love and reassurance I could muster. "I'll be back before you know it, Sarah," I promised, though the words tasted bitter on my tongue. Boarding the transport plane, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me like a heavy blanket. The roar of the engines drowned out the doubts swirling in my mind as I braced myself for the journey ahead. As the plane took off, leaving behind everything I held dear, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held in store for Sarah and me. Little did I know, the hardest battles were yet to come, and they wouldn't be fought on the battlefield, but in the depths of my own heart. Deployed in Iraq, miles away from home, I found solace in our scheduled video calls. Each pixelated image of Sarah's face brought a fleeting sense of comfort, a reminder of the life waiting for me beyond the desert sands. But as the days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Sarah's voice sounded hollow over the crackling connection, her smiles forced and distant. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to the strain of separation, but the gnawing sense of unease refused to be ignored. One night, during our usual call, Sarah dropped a bombshell that left me reeling. "I've been talking to Steph," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "She's offered to let me stay with her while you're deployed. It'll help us save money and get out of debt faster." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility. It was a practical solution to our financial woes, a lifeline in the midst of uncertainty. And yet, beneath the surface, doubts lingered like shadows in the dark. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that there was more to Sarah's sudden enthusiasm than met the eye. But I pushed aside my misgivings, clinging to the hope that this plan would bring us closer together, not drive us further apart. As we said our goodbyes that night, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope amidst the uncertainty. Maybe, just maybe, this was the fresh start we needed to build the life we'd always dreamed of. Little did I know, the storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, and the calm before the storm was about to give way to a tempest of betrayal and heartache. As the days stretched into weeks, and my deployment in Iraq dragged on, the distance between Sarah and me seemed to grow with each passing moment. Our scheduled calls became less frequent, the once vibrant connection now reduced to sporadic bursts of static-filled conversation. I tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my chest, the gnawing sense of dread that refused to be silenced. Was it just the strain of separation, or was there something more sinister lurking beneath the surface? I watched helplessly as Sarah's face flickered on the screen, her smiles forced, her laughter hollow. It was as if she was fading away before my very eyes, slipping through my fingers like grains of sand in the desert breeze. I tried to reach out, to bridge the growing chasm between us, but my words fell on deaf ears. Each call ended with a hollow echo, a reminder of the distance that now stretched between us like an unbridgeable gulf. The doubts that had been lingering at the edges of my mind now rose to the surface, threatening to engulf me in a tidal wave of uncertainty. Was Sarah slipping away from me, or was I just imagining things? I tried to push aside my fears, to focus on the mission at hand, but the ache in my chest refused to be ignored. As I lay in my bunk at night, staring up at the stars through the open tent flap, I couldn't help but wonder what had gone wrong. Little did I know, the answers I sought lay hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered in the harsh light of truth. And when they finally came to light, they would shatter the fragile illusion of our marriage, leaving nothing but broken pieces in their wake. Each day brought more silence, more avoidance, until it felt like we were strangers occupying the same space, speaking in empty words and hollow promises. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that Sarah was keeping secrets from me, hiding behind a facade of false smiles and forced laughter. But I pushed aside my doubts, clinging to the hope that it was just the distance playing tricks on my mind. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a familiar face in Sarah's social media posts that the truth came crashing down around me like a ton of bricks. There he was, lurking in the background of every photo, a constant presence in Sarah's life that I couldn't ignore. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal coursing through my veins as I scrolled through the images, each one a dagger to the heart. Who was this man, and what was he doing with my wife? Unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, I took matters into my own hands and cloned Sarah's phone, desperate for answers. What I found shattered my world into a million pieces, leaving me gasping for breath in a sea of lies and deceit. The messages were like a punch to the gut, each one a painful reminder of the betrayal I had never seen coming. Plans for a baby, declarations of love, secrets shared between lovers behind my back. I confronted Sarah, my voice trembling with rage and hurt, demanding answers to questions I didn't want to ask. And as the truth spilled from her lips, I felt the ground give way beneath me, plunging me into a bottomless pit of despair. How could she do this to me, to us? I thought we were in this together, that we had each other's backs no matter what. But now, as I stared into the abyss of her betrayal, I realized that our marriage had been nothing but a lie. In that moment, everything changed. The trust we had built over years of laughter and tears lay shattered at my feet, replaced by a gaping wound that refused to heal. And as I stood there, clutching the shattered fragments of my shattered heart, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The storm clouds had gathered on the horizon, and the tempest of betrayal had swept away everything I held dear, leaving nothing but devastation in its wake. The revelation of Sarah's betrayal left me reeling, my mind spinning with a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, hurt, betrayal, they all swirled together in a storm of confusion and pain. But amidst the chaos, one thing became clear: I couldn't let Sarah get away with what she had done. With a sense of grim determination, I set out to exact my revenge. I froze our joint accounts, changed passwords to every account I could think of, and blocked Sarah on every form of communication imaginable. She wouldn't be able to reach me, wouldn't be able to beg for forgiveness or plead her case. As I watched her world crumble around her, a perverse sense of satisfaction washed over me. She had destroyed everything we had built together, torn apart the fabric of our marriage with her deceit and betrayal. Now, it was her turn to suffer the consequences. I exposed her infidelity to our friends, sharing the damning evidence of her betrayal for all to see. I wanted them to know the truth, to see Sarah for who she really was, a liar and a cheat. And when I learned that she and her lover had lost their jobs as a result of my actions, I felt a twisted sense of vindication. They had brought this upon themselves, had reaped what they had sown. But amidst the chaos of my revenge, a nagging sense of regret began to gnaw at the edges of my conscience. Was this really the right course of action? Had I sunk to Sarah's level, become the very thing I despised? As I lay awake at night, staring up at the ceiling of my barracks, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a line from which there was no return. But even as doubt clouded my thoughts, I knew that I couldn't go back. The damage had been done, and there was no turning back now. In the aftermath of my revenge, a sense of emptiness settled over me like a heavy fog. The adrenaline of my actions had faded, leaving behind a hollow feeling in the pit of my stomach. I had struck back at Sarah and her lover with a vengeance, but now, as the dust settled, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost a part of myself in the process. I focused on my mission, throwing myself into my work with a fervor bordering on obsession. But no matter how hard I tried to bury myself in the chaos of war, the memories of Sarah's betrayal lingered like a shadow over my thoughts. As the days turned into weeks, and then months, I found myself wrestling with conflicting emotions. On one hand, I felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that I had exposed Sarah's infidelity for all to see. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stooped to her level, become the very thing I despised. When Sarah reached out to me, begging for forgiveness and pleading for a second chance, I turned her away without hesitation. I had closed that chapter of my life for good, leaving behind the wreckage of our failed marriage and the pain of her betrayal. But even as I stood firm in my decision to cut ties with Sarah, a part of me couldn't help but wonder what might have been. Had things turned out differently, could we have salvaged our marriage and found our way back to each other? In the end, I knew that I couldn't dwell on the past or waste time wondering about what might have been. The only thing I could do was focus on the future, on rebuilding my life from the ashes of my shattered dreams. And so, with a heavy heart but a renewed sense of purpose, I turned my gaze toward the horizon and set out on a new journey, one that would lead me far from the pain of the past and toward a brighter tomorrow.